Today we're going to talk a little bit about biographical writing. It is chapter 9 that you will be reading in your text by Gail Tompkins. So when reading, we're going to talk about reading first. When reading biographies, students are able usually to examine the lives of well-known people throughout history or learn more about current leaders and celebrities, important people. So it just makes sense that through biographical writing that students can not only report on events in their own lives or the lives of others, but they can do so in interesting and creative formats. And that's what I want to talk about today. There are 4 types of biographical writing. The first one is a personal narrative. The second is memoirs. The third is autobiographies. And the fourth, biographies. And we'll talk about each of these in a little more in depth. And looking at the instructional overview for each of these types of biographical writings, you'll find that in general, and this is not always, but just in general, that kindergarten through grade 2, children are asked to write personal narratives. And one example of a personal narrative is an All About Me book. I'm going to be showing you an example of an All About Me book coming up in this slideshow. But I believe there's also one within your text. Then looking on in grades 3 and 5, the autobiography is introduced. Again, this is not, autobiographies, of course, can be introduced in kindergarten through grade 2, but in general, grade 3 and 5 is where autobiographies are a focus, or the biography genre. And students are asked to write autobiographies. They're also asked to write simulated journal entries from their point of view or from another person's point of view. At this time, they can create a biography project about a person. Then looking at grades 6 through 8, this is in general when we ask students to begin to write memoirs. And also ask them to start creating multi-genre biographies. And when we do this, we ask them to do it with at least 3 genres. And we'll be talking about that too coming up. So talking about the personal narrative, this format will invite the reader to share in an experience that an author has had. Students should strive to have the reader understand the significance of the experience and feel as though they've lived through it too. A personal narrative is often the first type of writing assignment that a student is asked to complete. And one reason that children are so successful in writing personal narratives, and Tompkins says this in her text, is that they can draw on what they know best, and what they know best is themselves. So, a personal narrative is based on an experience. It's told from the first-person point of view. It is written chronologically. It includes dialogue and sensory details, and it may give insight into how the author feels about the experience. It's often about community. It can be about family, usually is, and about themselves, often is. So a young child may begin writing narratives, and they may begin doing that with an illustration and a line on each page. Their accounts can also be written in a sentence format. And if you don't mind, I'm having a little trouble. There we go. So like a narrative, a memoir is an account of a life event. And a memoir is often, within a memoir, is often asked to interpret a life event. It usually incorporates powerful images. And again, remember that a memoir, we're going to focus that on a higher elementary grade level. And it involves vivid details, links episodes, and unifies themes, and is generally, again, for older children and adults. And here are some good examples of mentor texts. We've been talking a lot about mentor texts, and just some good examples. They're ones from the text, and you can look at those. Moving on then to autobiographies. Autobiographies are sometimes confused with memoirs. The difference is that an autobiography is more complete, and it tells the story of a person's entire life. And here are some elements of an autobiography. Again, and they're more complete. They span the person's entire life. They're usually presented in chronological order. They describe memorable experience and events and give insight into personality. And they can be presented in a variety of formats. Some formats from autobiography can be extremely creative. If you know children and students, and some of them are so creative as writers. In order to create or to, I guess I might say, to instill some creativity, there are some wonderful instructional strategies that you can ask children to be involved in. One of them is an All About Me book. We talked about that. Those contain information about the students. I mean, they get so excited about this, such as their birthday, family members, friends, and students are they usually draw pictures to go with the text that they write. And then there are such things as life boxes, which are a collection of items that are placed in containers. They might be 4 or 5 items, and they represent the students' important events in their lives. Some of those items might include the student's baby blanket, family photos, vacation postcards, pictures, and letters, and such like that. Then another example to try to instill that enthusiasm are bio bags. And children collect some of their favorite books to create bio bags. And students then take the books and write reviews and comments about why they value each book. And then they can share the bags and the insights with other students, with teachers, with their families, whomever. Another example is a me quilt. Students draw a self-portrait, and then around that self-portrait, they can put up to 8 pictures to symbolize an event that's significant to them. And they put those in the boxes surrounding their portrait. Students can then write paragraphs to describe each picture and add them to the quilt. That's again called a me quilt. And then chapter books. Students write chapter books about 3 or 5 events in their life, and each chapter can be about a different event. What I have for you are some examples of biographies, and I want to tell you a little bit about each one just quickly. A biographical sketch is a brief, usually just one paragraph or not more than 2 pages, account of a person's life and major activities, and it's often found in a collection or a collective biography where several sketches are grouped by theme. There's some good examples in the text of biographical sketches. One example of that is called Almost Astronauts. I think it's a really good one and an up-to-date one. It's written about 13 women who dared to dream. It's a 2009 book, so you can look for that. Then there are biography posters or biographical posters. A biography poster presents information about the subject or information about their accomplishments and important dates, moments in their lives and such, and would also or usually contains a portrait of the subject they're writing about. And then there's this example called a hot seat activity. The hot seat activity is essentially a role-playing activity where students explore and interpret the historical figures' life events. So students sit in a chair while other students interview them as their subject. And this activity requires that students know their subject thoroughly, can think quickly and respond to questions, and they must learn about their character. Plan a costume, prepare opening remarks, and introduce the character. And then answer questions and summarize information. So that's going to be quite fun. A bio poem, and I've got an example of that coming up shortly. Students write poems about historical or contemporary figures and themselves. The format of the poem is structured. The first line is the person's first name, and the second through the 9th lines are descriptions of the person. Line 10 then tells where the person lives or lived, and line 11 is the person's last name. Fun, those are fun, and they're called bio poems. A collective biography is where students divide a biography into chapters or categories. Each student composes one section of the biography while using the writing process to refine and to publish their work. Students then compile their work into a shared format. It's a fun activity too. And lastly, in this list of examples of biographies is the multi-genre biography. And again, as stated before, you probably would want to direct that to older students or students who have had a little bit of, had some success in writing biographies. A multi-genre biography focuses on one subject, but the information is presented in a variety of formats. Each piece contributes to the biography, and students compile all the pieces on a poster or in a notebook, and the pieces could include things like life's lines or quotes, photographs, simulated journals, poems, reports, letters, stories, posters, newspaper articles, and such. Again, I noted a little bit before that I had some examples, and one of the examples is an all about me. It's kind of small to see, so if you can perhaps go back into this PowerPoint and just take a look at this activity. You'll also find some in your text too. Can't cite the page number, but there is an all about me example there. The next example that I talked about that I share with you is an example of how to write a bio poem. Again, this is very small. It's hard to see on the PowerPoint, but if you can go back into this and just look at this frame and make it larger, you'll see how to write a bio poem, and then there's a good example on the same slide here. So those are all good. Just here are some mentor texts, by the way, that have to do with biographies. Same kind of examples that I gave you before, and you'll find more others in the text. And if you're looking up lesson plans, you'll find mentor text examples there also. So when you're introducing, just in general, when you're introducing the genre of biographical writing, students should be introduced to the genre by sharing books of life stories and discussing characters of biographical writing. So it's important for students to understand that biographies are true accounts, and they provide insight into whomever they are talking about, whomever the subject is, and their personality. Mentor texts should be used to introduce the genre and to assist students in identifying the nonfiction elements that are key to that kind of writing. And you've been looking again at a lot of lesson plans, digging that information up, and noticing that there are a lot of mentor texts that are usually provided with each lesson plan, and you've found those yourself. So if you, and one of the best things to do, of course, is to do the biographical writing within a writing workshop. So if you're using a writing workshop format, then the students can complete their biographical writing during that workshop time. That would be the quiet time when they work on their own. And the teacher is then able to teach different mini lessons that individual students or groups of students might need, and they can develop these mini lessons around the format, or share different mentor texts, or provide more guided practice for students, and all allowing for lots of independent writing time. Students, this is so important. You know how important this is because it's important in your own writing. I know that. They should feel free to choose their own topic and to share ideas with others. So, talking about testing and the testing connection to biographical writing, those of you who have been in the classroom, or either your own classroom, or have been looking on and doing student teaching, or doing observations, that you might know that in a lot of the testing, students are often asked to write a personal narrative in response to a prompt on a writing test. The only thing I want to say about this is that it's important that students have had previous practice in doing this in order to be the best they can be in writing to a prompt on a test. And I know a lot of people call that teaching to the test, but it's not only doing that, but it's allowing students, again, to get that experience and be the best that they can be, and not be completely at odds of not understanding what to do when they come up to it in a test situation with a prompt that asks them to write a personal narrative. So, what we can do when we assess biographical writing is, and this is your own assessment, this isn't standardized testing kind of stuff, but when you look at students writing, you're going to be looking for the traits within the piece. As children initially write a narrative, what you're going to be looking for is that it has common thread, and that has one line of text and an illustration on each page. It contains an illustration and text that matches, and it is composed in first person. Of course, that's for very elementary kind of writing piece, but that's what we look for in writing. So as students become more familiar with that genre, and they start to develop more polished pieces, their writing should, and these are some examples that you want to look at when you assess their writing, that they begin to focus on one event or one experience, that their writing contains specific people, specific locations, and specific objects, and that when they're writing, the details contain sensory details that they show within their writing, not just tell, but they show. They describe actions well, and they utilize dialogue or monologue when doing so. Usually we look for chronological sequenced events, and whatever is written contains some kind of a suspense or surprise ending. That would be all those examples would give you a really good piece of writing from a student. Students should understand that the requirements for whatever project they're doing, and they should understand the requirements and how they're going to be graded for it. So in order to do that, teachers would create and provide a rubric or some kind of an assessment checklist so that the students would understand what to do. And then in the end, very important informative kind of assessment is that students should be able to self-assess their own work, and often teachers require them to attach the rubric and the checklist to their writing so that the teachers can take a look at what the student has accomplished and how they feel about it. So that's a little bit from Chapter 9 on biographical writing. And that's it.